extra podcast from the hosts of the Community Pulse. Let's hear what your hosts are talking about in this episode.
Who wants to say it?
I'll say it. That was a great episode. That was an amazing episode. Our guests were on point, and I really valued their opinions, and I actually learned something from that episode that I didn't know about. So that was really, really great.
Yeah, the time flew by. Obviously, it was great to have both Rizzo and Chris on, two people we haven't had on before, and both seems to have a lot to share. And I mentioned in the show, we were just scratching the surface. We got through exactly 3 bullet points in our list of topics that we wanted to touch on. But I thought, first of all, we kind of kicked things off on like what are people using, and specifically around ChatGPT and Copilot. And I think we learned that there's maybe some other things to think about when it comes to using these things to create content on our behalf when we're submitting talks. One of the things I brought up is it's made my life a lot easier to crank out some content and to come up with some really snazzy titles and like do some of the work that quite honestly just is hard. Like it's hard to naming's hard, and especially when you're coming up with something to try to stand out from a stack of other CFPs. This tool has made that situation a little different for us now. We have like that partner in crime to help us come up with a bunch of lists and hashtags and anything else that's helpful. But then we also switched gears and said, what's it like on the receiving end of that, for those who are now having to sift through this proliferation of conference abstract submissions? Are we creating a scenario there? And so I thought it was interesting to hear their thoughts on that, because it sounded like that wasn't something that they'd given a whole lot of thought to prior to today. I don't know if we heard from you though. Did you have any opinion on that?
That thing about the deluge of stuff and having to go through it. Actually, I looked it up because I wanted to bring those up as an example. In 1998, there's a Mark Wahlberg movie called The Big Hit, and it's like a comedy. They're gangsters or whatever, and then they're calling someone to extort something, and so they use a trace buster. So when they call someone, that the call won't be traced, but the person on the other end uses a trace buster. And so that they can go through a trace buster, but the person on the other end who does the call is using a trace buster.
It's a cat and mouse game, isn't it?
And it just reminds me of like, there's going to be almost like an arms race on both sides, saying like, I'm getting all these submissions that are automated, so now I'm going to use automation to go through all these submissions. And then,
well, everything's cyclical, right? And I think at least a lot of the events I intend on being involved in or whatever, like I'm still going after quality over quantity. And so just because you submitted 10, that might raise some red flags for me that, a lot of these might have been auto generated to some degree. But what it sounds like to me, now you have to like, still, you could get ChatGPT to write a bunch of abstracts for you, but you're going to still have to make those 10 stand out from Wesley's 10, so we're still have to like somehow dial in on quality material and standing out amongst this larger set of content. But as somebody who has spent a lot of time reading CFPs and trying to decide if this is, going to be what we're looking for the program, I am not looking forward to having a whole lot more. So I think, one of the things we landed on is you might see events put harder caps on either you can't use ChatGPT because we'll use our Buster tool to detect that. Or you put just a numerical limit on it and say, give us your best 3. We can't take all 10 of them now anymore.
And I used kind of like what I've used it for abstracts as well. But the way that I did it is that I wrote a bad abstract. Like I knew that my first version wouldn't be good. And I asked ChatGPT, act like a technical copywriter and rewrite this. And so it had the elements that I wanted in it. And then I changed a couple things to make it sound like my voice. So I use that as a way of enhancing. And I think we already have tools like this, like Grammarly or spell check or anything like that. But I think more using it that way kind of like is a balance of both worlds. And those who are just using the pray and spray and just auto generating a whole bunch of submissions, some of those will go through, but I do fear for those who on the other end who have to sort through that to find the
Well,
positive.
and this came up a couple weeks ago when we were, brainstorming about this episode, where I have seen people within my social network go on to LinkedIn, I think, and other places, and say, basically air their frustration around how
Mhm.
this has now made things more difficult for them, and they just simply are going to um, try to detect something that's been generated through AI, and it's an automatic disqualification. It's just not
Mm.
something we want. And you know, uh, Grammarly is a good example of something that's been out there for a long time that a lot of people, in many industries have relied on to clean up their grammar and just help them write a little bit stronger content. I don't, I'm sure these conversations around, is that cheating, or not that cheating is really the concern here, but is it causing some downstream repercussions that we're just not really um, thinking through? So that was an area I really wanted to hit on and hear their thoughts around. So it sounds like it is something people are struggling with, but we're already
Mhm.
realizing, just like in academia, I think there's a lot of folks who are saying, we're not going to be able to accept these submissions for entry into programs or whatever the case may be. Like we can't we we can't allow these types of tools to become anything more than like the scientific calculator did for those who were doing a lot of arithmetic with previous tools. Like these are tools, but we still have to show our work, and we still have to be able to communicate in our own voice. I think that's a big part of it too. Even if it's b- written better on a technical scale from ChatGPT, in terms of formatting goes. I think um, I like to read through something and get a sense of something that's not so automatic, not so generative. And I think anybody who's used ChatGPT can sense that like synthetic um, part of it when you read back the results.
And the way that you bring it up, it just the evolution of the way things have changed. It reminds me of like the styles of communications and how that's changed over time, and also how technology has also evolved. That when you think all the way back to the handwritten letter, how formal that was, probably in cursive handwritten, right? And then how when we moved to email, you would send a message and it'll still be kind of businessy formal, but probably more to the point and kind of shorter. And now you send that email. And then we moved over to at least inter company communications to Slack. And those messages are now more like truncated. They're shorter, they're more to the point, more casual. And knowing that you can use a tool to kind of like fluidly move between those different styles, what is the essence of it that actually matters? What is the essence of it that is you, that is going to be the part that people are actually connecting with? And I haven't actually thought of it from that perspective about like communication. Like, what is the important part when you can use an automated computer to do the thing that you want to kind of
Yeah.
transfer?
I think there's maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome that is starting to show its head in some of these things too. The more I think about how ChatGPT or any of these can help me, it's shortcutting things, but it's also, like um, helping me get my thoughts out
Mhm.
in a clear way that I previously struggle with, I guess, in
Mhm.
lots of different realms. And some of that we touched on around metrics and how these tools and many others that fall into the AI bucket can be used to take a lot of numbers and make sense of them.
Mhm.
I've seen some demos where people are using in the science realm, going through not just code, but going through like massive data sets to understand what are we looking at here. That it would have taken a person a lot longer to get through that, and um, there's no need for that extra time. You know what I mean? Like, let's just try to get straight
Mhm.
to the numbers and make them more understandable and actionable is a big part. And I think this is an area where I know personally I have successfully used it in that regard, where it's always important to be able to summarize projects you're working on and share those throughout the greater team and the org and all that kind of thing. And I'll be honest, it takes a little bit of time and effort to sometimes pull in those numbers, put them together in a way that makes sense, that's valuable and actionable, and then communicate that out to a larger audience. Some people do it really easily and do it really well, and others, like myself, that's a little bit more of a challenge. And I think to have these types of tools just makes it relieves that imposter syndrome. It's like, oh no, this is, we'll get through this. We can make this summary. It makes sense and show the important highlights and all that kind of thing. So I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit and maybe advocating too much for helping with the metrics part. I don't know that it's going to be able to like find the silver bullet metric for DevRel. You know what I mean? But I think it does help us communicate with everybody else what's going on and make sense of our world.
I think I want to touch on metrics too, but what you were saying before about I think it also breaks barriers between an editor and a creator in a way that I don't think we've seen before. I just launched Wesley's Office Hours. I don't know if I talked about it previously, but then I wanted a logo for it. And so I went to Fiverr and I worked with a graphics artist and I said, I want it to be soft, but not hard. And I want it to be welcoming. And I kind of wanted my branding. And then they came up with a few options. And I was like, I know I like this. And then I would like to blend a couple aspects of these, like make the font less bold and make it more softer in terms of the edges of this font. And then they came up with another version. And so like from that point of view, I was not the creator, but I guided it through just my critique about like what I like and didn't like to end up with something that was good in terms of my own opinion. Yeah. And so like I can't draw, but yet I helped use these tools and a person to create a logo with the same ease. If let's say I was an artist, I was a real painter, I could ask Stable Diffusion to come up with several different options and just get inspiration and then create something totally original that may not even resemble any of those options that were given to me, but get inspired to get started and start creating. And I think the way that you can use the tools on both ends between an editor or creator feels just totally new, and we have to get used to how we can choose when to be what role in either fashion.
Absolutely. And we spent most of that podcast just talking about ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot. We didn't even get around to some of the other tools that are out there. I mean, on a daily basis, I'm using some AI captioning tools that save me a ton of time. And and there's other, like what you're talking about with stock photography. Like there's Dolly and other tools where you can come up with new images and new audios, even in different tools. And unfortunately it's a little scary, but there's even some avatars out there, like I failed to mention that the opening monologue to the podcast was actually co-written with ChatGPT and myself. But for a moment, I entertained the idea of actually using that monologue, taking the transcript from that, putting it into one of those AI tools that generates a person and and a voice, and have an AI avatar do the opening monologue. I kind of just ran out of time this week, and also I thought that might be a little out of bounds. I don't know that anybody we're talking to is quite to the point where they're automating the creation of the words, automating the audio and visual media that our audience will see. That said, I do see that content out there. People are doing that in different industries. I'm not prepared to completely go that route just yet, but it is interesting that that technology is here and people are using it. So yeah, there's a lot of other tools out there that we didn't bring up, but
I saw on LinkedIn there's this DJ that said, write me a verse about, I might get the genre wrong, about rave music and in the style of Eminem, and it wrote a verse, and then they took that verse and fed it to another audio or voice generation and they made Eminem actually sound like he said it.
Mhm.
And then they took that clip, that audio file of Eminem saying this new verse, and then they put it in a song, and they introed that in terms of their DJ set of doing their own mixing of their own music. And so now it sounds like Eminem's introducing this song that he never thought about, he never said, never wrote, never sang, but
Yep.
yet now he's there performing
Well,
in something that he didn't consent to, which is
and
also interesting.
and that takes us right back to the responsible AI and ethical thing. Now we're like in the deep fake conversation, and which leads to disinformation and sharing things, communicating out information that just isn't true, but because you saw or / heard it from my seemingly mouth, you took that information as truth, or at least that he said that. I saw him say that, or I heard him
Yeah.
say that. That causes some concern for sure. I think I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Earlier we were talking about I'm an open source human. Like if I said it,
Mhm.
it's out there to be heard and shared. Something or someone else doing it and pretending to be me is
Yeah.
probably another subject that we should talk about, because that's
Right.
not the same. I'm not okay with that.
I heard someone who was using it, the same audio like reproduction of someone's voice to do swatting attacks.
Yeah.
So there are different. This is something that we all need to deal with, even if you think that you're not directly in your day-to-day job dealing with technology. These tools and the products of these tools are probably going to touch every aspect of our lives, no matter what. And this is genie is out of the bottle. So people who are not dealing with this subject matter, thinking through these use cases, this is not going away. It's only going to evolve and get better. So it's good that we have this conversation now, and we should probably think about having another show after we've learned all of these other new use cases that we didn't think of, to kind of like experiment and talk through those.
And not only are those tools here and they're being used, clearly, it just feels like things are speeding up faster and faster. I think we all feel that. Objectively, things are just faster. I mean, the number of people who have signed up for ChatGPT and how quickly that happened, there's never been anything like it. Yeah. So I don't know. With that, I think we're probably just about out of time for this episode of the After Pulse, but there's so much more I think we should plan on talking about, and how these technologies can both benefit us in the DevRel industry and just in software development in general, or lots of industries. But obviously, we're here to talk about DevRel and building communities. I think we're going to learn more and more about how this is playing a role in what we do across all of the different things that we do in our industry. So, Wes, you got any other final thoughts?
No, not really. It's just that I've been thinking about interfaces, and I'm just wondering if maybe AI is the next API, and maybe we'll talk about that later.
I think that's a good way to look at it. I think it is, an interface into information. Microsoft just announced their new Bing integration with ChatGPT, which I've played around with and is very interesting. Bard from Google is another, thing that's out there. These aren't going to be the only two. They're just sort of the first two here to do it right now. And it's going to be more and more, as far as I can tell. So with that, thank you, Wesley, for everything you do and helping us keep this show going and being another awesome host for today. It's great to have Rizzo and Chris. Thank you to both of them. And thank you to you, the audience, for joining us on another After Pulse session from the Community Pulse. And we will see you next time.
This has been another episode of After Pulse with Mary Thengvall, Jason Hand, PJ Haggerty, and Wesley Faulkner. Learn more at communitypulse.io or at community_pulse on Twitter. We'd love to hear from